Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Harebrained Games. This episode came about as the form of a question that was given to me that I almost made a question of the week, except for the fact that it required a little bit more in the form of an answer than I wanted to give time. So I decided to make it its own episode. The question was, what are the top 10 board game sites that I find indispensable? Came about as I was going around talking to my usual peeps who said, hey, I like your channel, pat, you're so cute. What are some better sites? Okay, or at least what are some other sites that you see, Tim? And I thought that was a very, very valid question because as an avid board gamer, there are sites that I visit that provide me, just huge dividends as far as helping me learn about games I want to play, recall games I'm already playing, learning games that I want to learn so that I can then play the game and maybe even review it on the channel. So I decided to go ahead and do a top 10 of sorts, board game sites that I find indispensable, and maybe you will too. The first one I'm going to go with is Watch It Played. This is on YouTube, and it's hosted by Rodney Smith, who is, I believe I've described him as the Cary Grant of the board game industry. To me, his videos he has elegance, he has an unassuming charm, and a perennial poise that make it a no-brainer recommendation for anyone wanting to learn about games. He's not necessarily as much in the review aspect as he is just helping people learn about games. While he often strands solo gamers and leaves the learning part up to them to discover on their own, he's as dignified of an ambassador as you're going to find. So Watch It Played is one that I would take a look at if you're interested in that. Number 2 is No Enemies Here. Now this is a totally different direction site. This is hosted by host Dan, and he is a fantastic ambassador of gaming in his own right. He covers a lot of ground, and he talks to others in the industry game designers, people who are related to industries, and it all helps put names and faces behind the games that we play. He's upbeat. He's not afraid to ask questions that are on our mind that some of us might be too timid to ask. So check it out there. He generally steers towards wargaming, but he does other types of gamings too. So No Enemies Here. Third is Slicker Drips. If you get a chance to watch his videos, he has one of the kindest presentations you will find. He's a treasure trove of learning opportunities for contemporary gaming. He always does a precise job of explaining games, better than I do, I think, and he does it all with kind of a congenial down-home atmosphere. So Slicker Drips, if you get a chance to check that channel out, I think for learning games you'll get it. And the other way of learning games is John Gets Games. All one word. And it's another friendly teaching site. It delves less into complex wargaming fare than it does the more popular board gaming entries of modern times. An approachable style, always friendly, meticulous. I've relied on John Gets Games for learning a game before diving in quite often. So another one. Then we on 3-Minute Board Games. Now this is a site that's dedicated to summarizing any game in about 3 minutes or less. And the curious thing here is that the individual that runs it does so with enough information that you can pretty much decide if it's something for you that you'd want to try. It's uncanny how much of packing is done in those 3 minutes. It seems impossible for a jabbermouth like me, but it's not. But all the essential info, how to play, pros, cons, alternative games, etc., is all packed into 3 minutes. So 3-minute board games. Then we have Gaming Rules. Paul Grogan, I believe, runs this one. And it's on the other end of the spectrum. It tackles some of the more complex non-wargaming fare, still with an eye on very detailed descriptions. And it might be a bit long in presentation if you just want to rush in and learn something fast, but it's a premier resource for learning a game that isn't trivial to learn. Many of the Vital Lacerda games, for example, he does an excellent job in explaining in very specific terms how to play it. So check that one out, Gaming Rules. Now we switch streams to another one, which is This Game is Broken. And the reason I like this site is not so much that it is filled with like scholastic content to learn, but that it has a highly relatable duo of Dave and Ilka. These are husband and wife, both with a very familiar and identifiable perspective on games in real life. I find it mirroring my wife and my experience as well. On the other hand, you also get from that channel a very motley crew of irreverent, sometimes edgy, sometimes madcap pontificators on board games, life and board game life. So This Game is Broken is, if nothing else, a very humorous and delightful segue into board gaming. Now, as far as war games, which is a segment that I play a lot of, I've been called an omni gamer, but wargaming is one segment that I do appreciate, mostly because I'm also a very, very interested person about history and learning about herstory all the time. And so the Gympie Gamer is one, if you're in that vein, it has a lot of content covering games and explaining them, again, in very clear human terms. The war games are broken down often with multiple playthrough segments, 1, 2, 3, 4 manageable chunks, going over high-level concepts, and then he also has a segment that stars his wife as she tries to guess war game components and such. Again, this is a wargaming community by and large, so keep that in mind when visiting, but that's another one. Now we sort of leave the informational, instructional realm and go into the highly entertaining realm. Things Get Dicey has been one of my joys of the last year or two. Things Get Dicey is not review-centric per se. It's not informational-centric. It's sort of a satirical insight center for modern board gaming life. And the thing I like about it is it reminds me of Galaxy Quest. Galaxy Quest was a movie that sort of spoofed Star Trek kind of culture, but it did so kindly and so reverently, with the idea that you were coming alongside to sort of just, take a quick, fun peek at life of the Trek world without just mocking it. I don't like mocking, and I thought that Things Get Dicey does a great job of showing us our idiosyncratic quirks, but not in a mocking way, even with its own self-deprecating humor at times. So that's one you want to check out if you just want a lighthearted guffaw as a board gamer. And number 10 this is my biggest guilty pleasure. This is one where I learn not nearly as much about games, but because of the over-the-top production values, Inside the Box, caveat, it's not always PG rated, is probably one of the most amazing over-the-top review sites. It is professionally notable sitcom style, productions using board games as a thematic basis more than it is, here's learning about board games, even though you will learn about board games, probably maybe even at times better because you just of the entertainment value. Its over-the-top production values is immense. It's jaw-dropping at times and how humorous and funny these 4 very disparate actors can be when they're creating their content. They don't do a lot of content because the content they do is takes a lot of time, I could tell. And that's, once again, it's a guilty pleasure. Comedy is the star. Learning games is a distant second. But what a treat when one of their production goes live. So those are the top 10 sites that I find indispensable as a board gamer. And you may too. There are lots and lots of game sites out there. I know I didn't add some of the larger, more well-known, more ubiquitous channels and sites because while they are places I view, I hold like a softer spot for trench gamers. Those are for me people who buy their own games, who put their own efforts and investments, where their cash is into learning the games. And I think that's more relatable to me. Because if you bought it, you played it, and then you're giving your thoughts on it, I think I find a unique legitimacy in doing all 3 of those things. It elevates the weighting of their opinion against, say, other sources. So other sites have also gone, and I didn't want to mention those because some of them, they're ones that were very funny for, a few months, but then they kind of fell off the wayside. So I didn't want to deprioritize them, but I wanted ones that people could come to in a year from now and hopefully still see some interesting concepts. So I hope you enjoyed this. It was unique and new. I don't plan to do this very often, but I thought it was worth its own broadcast. And more importantly, I'm not omniscient. So what are some other sites that I missed? What are some sites that you guys are finding indispensable that are helping you, because the internet's a big place and I'm a teeny tiny mind. So I'd love to hear from other people kind of what sites they're like, if I go to sites, I go to these sites every day, or this is the place I go to, you got to go to here, as a board gamer, you'll be robbing yourself of opportunity and glee if you don't visit there. So let me know. I'd love to know more about places on the internet that people find valuable as board gamers. With that, we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.